Al, your tomatoes are absolutely beautiful.
Well, we started out, we had a vegetable garden in the back, and it just didn't work. So we started doing it here, and lo and behold, with the sun coming from the south and the driveway, it turned out it was a fairly decent area. So we started working on how to improve it, and we put down some mulch, and then last year, in fact, we planted 9 tomato plants here. And at the end of the season, it got to be too much. So Mary said, just cut down to 4 this year. But what we did was a couple things. I used a trick that I found from your show, and I go to the flowers and I simply dust them and move them around to help pollinate them. And also to make sure that I don't forget what tomatoes we plant, I put them on the top of the stakes and put zip ties on them so it's easy to see. And in the fall, I go down to the local Ace Hardware store and simply buy some 10-10-10 fertilizer, spread out, and let it absorb into the ground over the winter. And then in the springtime again, I dress it with some more 10-10 fertilizer. And what we do in the fall, we clean up all the tomato residue to make sure that we don't have any carryover disease from one year to the next. And then I actually mark the holes in the fabric where the tomato plants were planted, and we plant them back in the same holes. Initially, when we started out, I put some potting soil in here. We dug it all out and put potting soil all the way along here to fill it in. So the tomatoes and the 2 pepper plants are the vegetables that we grow. And we then turn the back into a flower garden.
Well, whatever you're doing, don't quit because yours are about twice the size of mine, so you're doing great.
What is working for us may not work for everybody, but it has been years of working back and forth and improving each and every year to try to make it a little better. And that's what I think everybody has to do when it comes to gardening.
Well, whatever you're doing, it's perfect. But can I see the backyard that used to be your garden?
Sure, we'd be more than happy to show that to you, Mary. This used to be our vegetable garden here, and it never really worked out. So Mary and I talked about making it into a cutting garden. Well, it's not necessarily quite that easy. First of all, we had to till it up real good to make sure that there weren't as few weeds as possible. But then we also wanted to make sure that we divided it into quadrants. And so we put these stepping blocks in place. But the thing is with this, it takes a lot of horsepower and shovel power to get this. And I have the girth and the shovel power to do some of the stuff that Mary isn't able to do. So that's how we started. And then we come up with a plan on what plants to put in what location and slowly worked on it. And this is the first year of our cutting garden. So hopefully each year we're going to look at improving it and doing a little better job of, figuring out where the plant should be.
When did you start the seeds?
I started some of the seeds in February of this year. Some of the snapdragon seeds, some of the moss roses I started in the spring. We already had the rain barrel in place back here that we'd gotten a few years ago. So we didn't really need it this year because of the rain we've gotten, but some years it really comes in handy, and we can use that to help water some of the plants.
Al, how do you get all of these plants?
Well, some of them we buy the seeds, some of them I save from year to year. I save, for example, moss rose plants, I save petunia plants, I save snapdragons, and I save them in the fall of the year. And after they bloomed, instead of cutting the plants down at that time, I just let them turn into seeds. The petunias, the snapdragons, the marigolds, the zinnias. And then after they somewhat dry out, I cut the plants back, and sometimes I'll use regular shoe boxes or paper bags will also work to put them in and divide them up and then let them dry that way for probably a couple months. And then later on in the fall, after everything is done, that's when I start trying to hull out some of the plants. And I have different sieve sizes that, much like when I grew up on a farm where you would harvest grain and save some of the grain and run it through the fan mill to make sure that you had some good clean grain, except these are a lot smaller, you know, screens that I run them through and then save them till the next year. And so far, I've had fairly decent luck. But what I do, I start them out in a tray, and then I actually use red Solo cups as individual planters. Later on, I've got a small iron that I just poke little holes in around for good drainage, and then just let them drain and water them from the bottom so that you don't have problems. And then in the spring, when it gets time, you know, you get to set them out. And some of them, for example, the moss roses, a lot of them I just save the seeds and direct plant them into it. And what I do when I direct plant them is I take real fine sand and mix with the seeds so that you don't get seeds all bunched up. It kind of helps spread the seeds out along the way, so that helps.
Well, you have your things labeled so well. How do you get your signs?
Mary and I talked about it a long time ago, because part of the garden was she wanted to not only just label it, but she wanted to also use it to educate people on what some of these flowers were. So I started working on it, and this I work on in the wintertime. Between the time that I clean out the seeds and start my planting, I can work on signs that are needed for the next year. And over the years, we've added signs, and at the end of each year, she comes up with a list of more signs that she needs. And I paint them sometime during the winter months, and again, it keeps me busy.